Okay, so these are some parts that are kind of tricky, right? So C and D um, get a little bit different than just A and B being the more straightforward questions that you're seeing on this FRQ. Okay, but for sure D especially really isn't something that difficult. There is just a slight little trick that you might not notice, but I am going to bring it to your attention here. C is just kind of using logic here in terms of like really what it's asking for you to do. Okay. So C is saying, is the number of pounds of bananas on the display table increasing or decreasing at time t equals 5? And then it says, give a reason for your answer. So if you think about it, F is representing the bananas being removed, right? And G is representing the amount of bananas being added. So if I look at when T is 5, the amount of bananas being added minus, and then I look at the amount of bananas being removed, and I subtract those, if that's negative, right, that means then that the number of bananas should be decreasing at 5. Okay, and if it's positive, then it means that it should be increasing. That's because if you think about this, F is really a rate of change, right? Because F is measured in pounds per hour and G is measured in pounds per hour. So both of these are rates, right? Okay. So for C then, I'm going to consider G of 5 minus F of 5. Okay, because this is the G represents added, right? The rate at which the bananas are being added. So I should say the rate at which bananas are being added. Okay, and then I'm, subtracting the rate that they're being removed, right? Okay. And so what you should get here is that when you do this in your calculator, you should get that this is negative 2.263 103 or something, which is less than 0. That's negative, right? So if you think about this, if you have a rate of change that's negative, right? If the derivative is negative, then that means that it would be decreasing, right? So basically what I'm going to say as far as why the number of bananas is decreasing at time t equals 5 is because I got that G of 5 minus F of 5 is negative. Okay, so because G of 5 minus F of 5 is less than 0, the number of bananas on display is decreasing. At t equals 5. Okay. So yeah, that one just required a little bit of thinking, right? But hopefully that makes sense that if you're considering, the difference in the amount that's being added versus removed, and you look at that difference, and if it's negative, right, that means that, and you think about it, G minus F, both of those are rates of change. So if I'm subtracting two rates of change, I'm still looking at a derivative, essentially. It's still a rate of change at the G minus F. And so if that's negative, if that rate of change is negative, then it's got to be decreasing, right? Okay. So for part D, how many pounds of bananas are on display at time t equals 8? Okay. So this is truly a rate in, rate out problem because it's asking you at your final position at time t equals 8, how many bananas you got on display, right? So going back to the beginning, at t equals 0, there's 50 bananas on display, right? So that's how many bananas you got to start with. So this is your initial. Okay, so for D, I know that my start is 50 bananas. Now, I'm going to add in the amount of bananas that were being added. Now, here's what gets tricky. You want to say, your brain goes, oh, well, the amount of bananas being added would be from 0 to 8 because the time is 8. But be careful, you don't start adding bananas until time t equals 3, right? So instead, I got to start this integral from 3 to 8 of g of t dt. Okay, so this part represents the bananas being added. So I'm going to write starts at t equals 3 because context of problem says it doesn't start until t equals 3. Okay, and then obviously we're stopping at 8 because it says we want to know how many are on display at t equals 8. So far I've got the initial plus the amount that's being added from the time it starts to be, bananas are starting to be added to 8 because that's what we're looking at, right? And then we also have to consider the amount that's being removed. Now, it says they start removing bananas at t equals 0. So we would be, in fact, and since we're removing, then I need subtraction from 0 to 8 of f of t dt. Banana is being removed. Okay. And then once we put this in the calculator, what I get for this is 23.347. Okay, and so it doesn't ask for units, but this would be pounds of bananas, just to make sure that we're on the same page with the units. In general, I wouldn't put the units unless it asks for the units. Just in case you give the wrong units, it is possible that an EP reader could take off points for you giving wrong information. So unless it asks for it, I wouldn't bother with it. But I am putting the units for part D, or just in general talking about the units, because I want you to be aware of, if it did ask for the units on this question, would you know the units, to just kind of recall things. But yeah, hopefully this helps in terms of part D with this rate in and rate out problem. And then the other parts of this question was more just kind of interpreting the word problem.